Hey guys, it's PHYRRA, and today I decided to do a comparison video between the Urban Decay Naked Basics palette, the Naked 2 Basics palette, and the Pulp Fiction Collection palette. Because all three of these palettes have a bunch of workhorse neutrals, but how do you know which one's best for you? And hopefully with my video I will answer that. So the Naked Basics palette and the Naked 2 Basics palette both have 6 full-size eyeshadows, and they both retail for $29 each. The Pulp Fiction palette has 5 eyeshadows, 2 of which are split. All 3 of these palettes contain fairly similar colors, and each of them has a very, very light shade, a very, very dark shade. This one actually has a couple, so I'm going to swatch the lighter shades for you so you can see how they compare. I am swatching on primer. This is Furious, and it's from the Pulp Fiction palette. That's Venus from the Naked Basics palette, and that's Skimp from the Naked 2 Basics palette. So these 3 shades are basically sort of shimmery, satiny, I don't know, they call them demi-matte. Of the 3 of these, I probably like Venus the best, although Furious isn't bad. I'm not so fond of Skimp because it kind of blends in with my skin tone, so it's too dark in my opinion to really like open up and brighten my eyes. I need a lighter shade. So the next 2 colors I'm going to show you are from the Naked Basics palette. The first one is Foxy, and I'm not a fan of this shade. It's a yellow tone beige. And then there's Walk of Shame, which I absolutely love. This is like a pinky peach matte. This is the color that I use in almost every single tutorial I do as a beige shade or to blend out colors. I really like this one. So this is Righteous from the Pulp Fiction palette, and I like this one a lot. It's like a pale peach beige. It's great as a base shade or an eye-opening shade. This is Stark from the Naked 2 Basics palette. It's sort of like a peachy brown matte. It's okay. It's not my favorite. Of these 4, probably Righteous and Walk of Shame are my favorite. Walk of Shame I've used, for the past 2 years and absolutely loved. In fact, just to show you how much I love, I've even hit, pan on this Walk of Shame on my single. Like, I absolutely love Walk of Shame. It's such a great base shade for me, so this is definitely one of my favorites, but I really like Righteous too. Now we're getting into the Taupe shades. This is from the Naked Basics palette. This is Naked 2. The Pulp Fiction palette doesn't have a taupe, but the Naked 2 Basics has a ton. So where Naked 2 is a light brown, like milky brown type shade, this one is from the Naked 2 Basics. It's called Frisk. It's sort of like a light gray brown. This is Cover, and it's more of like a reddish brown. I guess it's still considered a taupe though. This is Primal. It's like a deeper brown taupe, but really these 3 shades are so similar and they're all in the same palette. They're all in the Naked 2 Basics palette. For me, I'm not a fan of any of these colors. These 2 colors are from the Naked Basics palette. This is Faint, which is a dark brown, and this is Crave, which is like a black brown. I really like this shade. I've used this to fill in my brows. I've used this to tightline, to darken my lashes. This is a really good shade for me. This is Undone from the Naked 2 Basics. It's sort of a smoky, deep taupe shade. I really like it. These last 3 shades are from the Pulp Fiction palette. This is Tyranny, which is like a mid-tone brown. Then there's Vengeance, which is a darker brown. And there's Anger, which is a black. So between these shades, I like Tyranny. Vengeance is okay. I like Anger. I absolutely love Crave. I really like Undone. Not so much a fan of Faint, but So for me, it's easy to eliminate the Urban Decay Naked 2 Basics palette because there are all these taupes, and they're like all like shades of brown taupe, and they're not shades that I reach for. Brown shades like that tend to go muddy on me very easily, so I find them harder to work with, which is why I end up finding like, darker colors or lighter colors, like the more extreme ends are much easier for me with my skin tone and my coloring. So while I do like, a couple shades in this palette, I like Undone, Skimp's okay, Stark's okay, like the other 3 shades I just can't see myself reaching for. So that's why it's easy for me to just say this is, this is the one for me to eliminate, which kind of surprised me because this is a cooler tone. This is supposed to be a cooler tone palette, but I just don't find that it's as complementary to my coloring. So now for me to decide between the Pulp Fiction palette and the Naked Basics palette. The Naked Basics palette has been a staple of mine for like 2 years, maybe a little longer, so it's definitely a palette I'm comfortable using. I've traveled with it several times, and I do like several of the colors in it. While I pretty much have no use for Foxy, and I've rarely ever used Naked 2 or Faint, I've used Crave a lot, Walk of Shame all the time, and I do like Venus. The Pulp Fiction palette has Furious and Anger, which are white and black, and because those are extremes, I find those to be shades that are easier for me to work with. So I like that. I like Righteous. It's a nice shade for the inner half of my lid, or an all-over lid shade, because it has a really nice brightening effect. Tyranny is one of those browns that I can sometimes work with. It's like a caramel brown type shade, so it makes for a nice contour, and I do like the deeper shade Vengeance. While there are only 5 shades in this palette, I do feel like I would get more use out of these 5 than I have out of the 6, because I would only use 3 out of this palette. So if you were trying to decide between the Naked 2 Basics, the Naked Basics, and the Pulp Fiction palette, if you were me, I would tell you to go for the Pulp Fiction palette. If you wanted to splurge and get 2, I would say the Pulp Fiction palette and the Naked Basics palette. I personally feel like with my coloring, I will get the most use out of the Pulp Fiction palette and the Naked Basics palette. The Naked 2 Basics palette, I just will not reach for as much because of all those taupey browns. Like, they're all just, I don't know, they go muddy on me. But I was quite surprised to find out that I decided that the Pulp Fiction palette would come out on top. Which palette would you choose between these 3? Please let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching.